want to thank you very much for all coming. My name is Charlie Simon. Today we're going to be talking about some of the risks of blue water sailing, and before we get started with the risks, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. My wife and my wife Kathy is right here. We just finished a circumnavigation. The boat is currently in Fort Lauderdale, and it will we've been back through here a number of times. Between the two of us, Kathy and I have sailed to Alaska twice from Seattle. We've been to, we spent 3 seasons in Puerto Vallarta, so we've been members of the yacht club here for about 8 years. Together we've accumulated about 100,000 nautical miles of sailing. On one of the legs, from the yacht club here, Andy Barrows sailed with us, and we enjoyed having him along for one of the legs. By profession, I'm a software engineer and electrical engineer. I have a lot of experience and do a lot of repairs in my own instruments. And just to give you an outline of today's lecture, well, the primary objective, we're all working in this together, is to make our passages as safe and comfortable as possible. But first, you get a quick tour of a few pictures that we took on our circumnavigation, because if you circumnavigate, what's the point if you don't get to do show and tell when you get back? We'll talk a little about the psychology of risk and what it is to be, you have different risk tolerance of various risks, and some actual risks, hurricanes, fires, man overboards. How dangerous are these relative to other risks? How do risks change when you go offshore? Many of you have done, how many of you are planning to do the puddle jump this year? So a good number of you. Many of you are bay sailors, and you're a little new to blue water sailing. And I can tell you from my first experience when Kathy and I went offshore, leaving Juan de Fuca in Seattle, it's like sailing off the edge of the world. And as you get more used to things, you get used to the risks and you accept different risks. But the risks change as you go offshore. You're further from help. You have the risk of being in a foreign land. And we'll talk about how you prepare your boat, but more how you prepare your mindset for the various risks. There are going to be other presentations further in the Puddle Jump series about safety equipment and radios and things. And so I'm going to brush over those a little bit, or I won't say brush over, we'll go a little lighter on those and speak more about this. I have about 1 hour of material, but 2 hours of time. So if you have a question, be sure and jump in and ask for clarifications or explanations at any time. I can't see you all at once, so shout out if you have a question, okay? A little about our... Before we started our circumnavigation, Kathy and I learned to sail in the San Francisco Bay. The boat previous to the current boat we purchased in Seattle, so we were based in Seattle for quite a while. We sailed to Alaska twice, because if you haven't sailed to Alaska and you were in Seattle, you're not a real man. So we did that. We sailed the U.S. West Coast down to Mexico. As I said, we spent 3 seasons in Mexico, and then we sailed on down to Panama, Belize, and through the Panama Canal back up to Florida. And so while many of you are going to go from here and go direct to French Polynesia, Kathy and I took the long route and went down to Panama, went through the canal, went up the east coast to Halifax, Nova Scotia, and then came back down and then did our circumnavigation and went out to Tahiti. So we kind of installed an extra 10 or 15,000 miles into the trip and gained a little experience. We have here the map of the route that we took before the circumnavigation. Starting up in Seattle, we went up to Alaska. Then you can see down the west coast. We spent considerable time in the Sea of Cortez, which if you have an extra season to spend in Mexico, I highly recommend that you take a month or 2 and go up to the Sea of Cortez and explore the islands and enjoy that trip. Then we went, as I said, to Belize, the east coast, and then we started our circumnavigation. If starting in Florida, we went out to St. Lucia, through the Panama Canal, Galapagos, French Polynesia, Fiji, off across all of the beautiful islands of the South Pacific, Australia. Then we went to the other side of the map, to Bali, across the Indian Ocean, where we encountered some kind of interesting weather. South Africa, back across the South Atlantic, and we re-entered the U.S. at Norfolk, Virginia. As I said, the boat's currently in Florida. We arrived back in the U.S. when? Last May, June, so we haven't been back that long. Just to give you a flavor, I have another presentation that I'll be giving in San Francisco, which is all of the destinations, but just to give you a couple that you might be able to do from here. One of the most interesting options is to take the Panama Canal. I've been through the Panama Canal 3 times. One of the nice things you do is you can go to the Panama Canal, and everybody who goes through the canal needs line handlers, so you can go through as a line handler on somebody else's boat once or twice or 3 times and get used to the idea before you take your own boat through, and you get a little experience before you go. But this was a montage of ships. If you want to get up close and personal with container ships, no place like Panama. And so here we get a little animation of the ships going through the locks. If you turn the other direction, of course, you end up in French Polynesia. When you first go to French Polynesia, well, here, let me show you on the map. French Polynesia is a long ways from here. You may have done that calculation, about 3,000 miles. And it is likely that you will go to Nuka Hiva because it is the island closest to Puerto Vallarta. But because we came through Panama, we entered at Hiva Oa and then went north to Nuka Hiva. Nuka Hiva is a far superior anchorage. Then you get to go through all of the islands, go down to Tahiti, Bora Bora. If you're going to get this far, you've got to go to Bora Bora and the surrounding islands. It's really worth the trip. French Polynesia is over 100 islands scattered out across 1,200 miles of ocean, so it's a huge country in terms of overall area, but in land area it's only about the size of Rhode Island and only has about 250,000 residents. Culture is French over Polynesian, and there are fascinating stories to tell us as the French provide something over $1 billion of aid annually to Tahiti, which makes Tahiti a little expensive. But on the other hand, it's one of the most developed islands in the South Pacific. And of course, you get a lot of spectacular diving. Here we have just a couple of pictures. This is the anchorage in Hiva Oa. The anchorage in Nuka Hiva is nicer. It's wide open. And here's a picture of Bora Bora. It's typical of the islands in the South Pacific, where you have a central volcano surrounded by a beautiful lagoon, and in this lagoon you might find animals such as this wonderful giant clam. I hope you can see the pictures. Can you see them in the back, or are they all too small? Good enough, okay. If you go further west out towards, and I skipped over lots of places, one of my favorite spots is the islands in Vanuatu. And we went to an active volcano on the island of Tanna. One of the wonderful things about this is you go visit a volcano in Hawaii, it's great, but you're a long ways away. In the third world country of island of Tanna, there are no guardrails. There's nothing to keep you from walking directly into this volcano. As a safety measure, there was a sign that says, if you see hot ash coming towards you, move. And we did, yes. So you will never be able to, in the U.S., in Hawaii, but in Vanuatu, you get the fabulous experience with the awesome power of the earth in these volcanic eruptions. The boat we took on this trip, this is our boat Celebrate. I think this picture was taken somewhere between Fiji and Vanuatu. It's a Tazwell 58, which is 60 feet overall. Kathy and I think it's an ideal size for 2 people. Many people would think they could get more on there, but we enjoyed it. There were sometimes, Kathy and I like to sail on our own, and we really enjoy that. On some legs we carried a 3rd crewman. And this is thinking a little bit about risks. You know, the idea is on your boat you carry a lot of spares. But whatever you carry a spare of seems not to break. And the thing that breaks is always what you don't have a spare of, though. So on many of the trips we carry a spare human. And then the humans don't break. But on the other hand, the problem of sailing with two people I think is an ideal crew, is that if one gets sick, then there's only one person sailing the boat. And the very first leg out of St. Lucia, Kathy got food poisoning the last night out, and the first 3 days she was completely incapacitated. And so I thought it was very fortunate that was one of the legs that we had a third person on.
And those of you who know Andy Barrow, he was knocking on the cabin door going, Kathy, get better, Kathy, get better.
Yeah.
Because he wanted a shorter.
Yeah, he didn't like those 12-hour days. He would have preferred the 8 he was promised. As you sail across the South Pacific, you get ample opportunity to get out your light air sails. And on the boat of this size, the only downside is that the Gennaker that we carried is such a monster that we didn't get to deploy it as much as I would have liked. We sailed on it an awful lot. And so I really appreciate it, but it goes up for nearly 2,000 square feet. So it's just a monster. Getting it up isn't that much of a problem, but if the wind comes up and you want to get it down, that's always the issue. And I wanted to say a word. Here we are at anchor in Fiji, and we put up all of these flags, and one of the flags there is a flag of the World Ark. And Kathy and I went on the World Ark rally. And just a couple of words, some of you may have gone on rallies or choose to go on rallies or choose not to go on rallies. We put up all of the flags as a token of respect to our hosts when we visited a country. And World Ark, we started from St. Lucia with 40 boats. And some people are concerned that, boy, aren't you in a rush all of the time? Well, we looked back across the logs. We spent 153 days underway going around the world, 300 days, maybe 310 at various ports, visiting places. And it's entirely up to you if you want to follow that schedule or take another year in New Zealand or choose whatever schedule you want. But you can make up your own mind at any time in the process how much time you think is appropriate to spend going around the world. And if you want to just puddle from place to place and spend 6 months in a place, that's a perfectly wonderful way to do it too.